I made the film The Future of Food because I have been an organic fanatic since 1970 when I became a vegetarian. And I also started making films that year, so I had always wanted to make a film about the food system and organic and how that was the way, organic is the way. So around the year 2000, I started researching that topic and I learned about GMOs. They were using recombinant DNA technology to transfer genes from one species to another and putting that in our food, using it as crops and putting it in the food, and the food system was full of it. So I was shocked because I'm committed to organic. I live in Northern California. I'm very educated about the food system, and I knew nothing about that. It was totally under the radar in the United States. They knew about it in Europe, and a friend of mine who's an environmental lawyer knew about it, but I didn't, so I was outraged. So instead of making a film about the organic agriculture and the food system, that film really swerved over and became about GMOs to inform people about it because the public didn't know about it. So it was the first film about GMOs. It was the first film about the food system. Back then when it came out in 2004, no one was talking about the food movement or foodies or anything like that. They were talking about the perfect peach, or this lovely wine, which is great. But they weren't talking about the forces underneath it that were making, really driving the food system in a way that was going to be difficult to change that if GMOs were able to take over. So the film was very well received. I didn't know if anybody would want to see it. Hundreds of thousands of people wanted to see it, and it was very popular. So I spent 4 years taking it around the country and around the world, and it really helped pass. What great story is, before it was even done, they were trying to pass an anti-GMO measure in Mendocino County. And so a friend of mine who lives up there called me and said, we're trying to pass this measure, I think it's measure 9, we're trying to pass this measure and I want to show your film around the county to show people. And I said, well, it's not really done, and there's temp music, and I want to wait till it's absolutely perfect to show people. He said, no, this is a big deal, we're voting on this, we really want it. So I let him use it, and we were perfecting the film. So every week we'd send him a new version. Actually, he had this tiny little plane because of where he lives in his work. He had a tiny little one-prop plane, and he would fly down, and we'd rush to the airport and hand him the latest copy, and he'd run up and he'd fly back up and show it. But I went up to some of those screenings, and they had screenings in the local school and in the local little local theater, dramatic theater, and in these places where normally people don't see films, or they go see. And back then, that was before there was this huge wave of political films that there are now. It was very unusual to have an advocacy film like that. They had mainly documentaries were personal stories. There hadn't been this the internet wasn't really that popular back then, so this was very unusual to have a film like that. In fact, my editor, who's an excellent editor, really fine and very accomplished, and has had many films, on PBS and in great festivals and theaters. And I said, well, Viv, we're going to make a film about the food system. And she said, oh no, we can't do that. It has to be personal stories. No one will want to see it, and no festivals will show it, no theaters will book it, and nobody's going to see it because if it's not a personal story. And I said, well, we have to make it everybody's personal story because everybody eats, everybody's involved with the food system. So, so in Mendocino County, when I went to the screenings I went to up there, it was an amazing audience because the rooms were packed, and people were absolutely transfixed on the film. They were so seriously watching it because they knew that they had the power to vote. They knew that they were going to vote on something, and this was informing how they voted. So the stakes were very high, and it passed. And it was the first county, the first anywhere in the United States, any place to ban the planting of GMOs. And so it went, there are several counties, including the county I live in, that had banned GMO. There's a string of counties down the coast of California that ban the planting of GMOs, except one where it failed several years ago, and that's actually up for vote again this year, so we're hoping that will pass Sonoma County. So I made that film to inform citizens about what was happening to our food supply so they could take action, and I also showed the alternative. I showed about patenting, showed how Monsanto was buying up the seed supply, and how they were against labeling, and all these other aspects of the GMO story, which now people are more aware of. And then the alternative to that, which is local food, CSAs, organic food, planting your own garden, that sort of thing. So it also showed that, and it was has been very, very popular and helped launch the food movement. It helped launch a mass movement for healthier food and to be conscious of what's in our food, what are we eating, and where did it come from, for people to be aware of the consequences of their food choices. So I was very happy and quite, like New York City, like New York City, you want to have a film be well received in New York City. It's like that's the big plum, is to have it in a good theater in New York and have people go see it. So it opened in New York at this great theater, Film Forum, which is probably the premier independent film theater in New York. And she booked the film, and I was already selling it to activists because there was all this activism against GMOs, and people were like, we this is great, we want it. And I had this special distribution system that I used about how to get it out, and we did it ourselves, and we had a special grassroots version for $100 that we would sell people, and they could buy it, and then they could do whatever they wanted with it. They could charge admission. They could actually make money off it. And so I was the first person to do this grassroots distribution, self-distribution, and my model was taught by probably the best independent film consultant about that at Cannes and Sundance, about how do you get your film out there. And it was also the first film that was sold in all the Whole Foods. So it was very popular. And so in New York, so she said, I want to book this film in Film Forum, and I was so excited, and she said, you're not selling the DVD, are you? And I said, actually, we've sold lots of DVDs, and people buy them by the 100. Like we got an order from a woman in St. Louis, and she wrote us, and she said, I live in St. Louis. My husband is in local politics. I hate Monsanto. I want to buy 100 copies. And, she got a discounted rate, 100 copies, and I'm going to give them out to all my friends. We're like, right on, lady. So it was very fun. So I said to Film Forum, I said, oh gosh, we are selling DVDs. So we have to stop selling the DVDs until it premieres in New York. We can't be selling DVDs at the same time as having a premiere in New York. And I said, but luckily she still wanted to book it, even though we've been selling DVDs. We sold thousands of DVDs. And so I said, okay, so we stopped selling DVDs, and we got all this activists who were like, no, you can't do that. You have to sell us the DVDs. No, you can't do it. So I called her up and I said, because we had booked it, it was going to be like 4 months away or 5 months away, because you want a bunch of time in filmmaking before you so you can prepare for your launch and do advertising and get stuff in magazines. There's like a whole thing you do, and it takes several months, right? And so I called back and I said, is there any way we can move it up, because the activists really want to buy these DVDs? And so we had this bit of good luck that a film that had been booked for like the next month was having trouble with its releases. And so there was a slot that opened up, and she said, we can move it to September. So I had like 5 weeks to get ready for a New York, premiere, which was like, And then it played there for 2 weeks, and it was so good that IFC, which is the other really good independent film theater in New York, called me up and said, we really want to show this film. It's very popular. And Film Forum had it I think they had it for 2 weeks, and we'd like to show it. And I said, great, so they walked over to Film Forum, and it was 35 millimeter at that point. They were films, and got the films, and then they showed it for I think 3 or 4 weeks. So it was very popular in New York, which was great, and that was fortunate. So that film did exactly what I wanted it to. It empowered people and communities to take action. And it's shown in many schools now, many universities also included, because it explains how genetic engineering works, that you use pieces of virus and bacteria to take DNA from one species and put it into another. And then you have this virus gene from a virus called the cauliflower mosaic gene, that cauliflower mosaic virus, that promotes the trait, that the trait will be promoted, so that will actually force that to happen. And then also antibiotic marker, which is problematic because that could create resistance to antibiotics in people that actually eat GMOs. So it was, that was before a lot of this research had been done about Roundup, because most GMOs are called Roundup Ready. That means you can spray them with Roundup and they won't die, because a bacteria that's resistant to Roundup has been engineered into every cell of that plant. So basically, GMOs, you spray them with poison and they don't die. And then the other GMO is Bt, which you take a soil bacteria, Bt, that organic farmers spray on their crops if they need to, you know, maybe once a year, not regularly, not every day. And that Bt, or actually a certain version of that Bt, is engineered into every cell of Bt crops, and that they express that poison every single cell. So you're getting a much higher dose of this Bt if you're eating it, rather than if it's being sprayed on your fields, you know, once. So, yeah, now these companies are consolidating and continuing to buy up seed companies. And just today, it's been announced that Bayer actually has bought Monsanto. So we won't have Monsanto to hate anymore. We'll have Bayer to hate. Yeah. Yeah, so then after that, I thought I'd make another film in that same realm, because it's important to me and I'm committed to it and have been for many, many years. And so I started making films in 1970, and that's when I became a vegetarian. So I've been at this for quite some time. So I decided to make a film on soil. So that was very interesting, and it's not just about soil and agriculture, because I think that most people assume that, you know, soil, ag, but actually soil is a vast and mysterious realm, and agriculture is just one part of it. And I think if we perceive soil as, you know, what can we get out of it? What's in it for us? That's not the right question. The way to perceive soil is that we have a relationship with it, and what is our part in creating a healthy relationship. And most people are soil blind, so I wanted to change that and move people towards being soil conscious. And that was a very interesting film, because as I researched soil, I realized, which is, you know, is something people say, that the plow has done more harm than the sword, because plow, you know, much of the topsoil that we've had on this planet has been eroded and because of agriculture, because you break up the soil and it blows off or washes off. So after researching soil and talking to soil scientists and starting to shoot the film, at a certain point I said, I told Ignacio Chapela, who's in the film and does the narration, I said, I don't want to have any agriculture in this film. I'm really angry at agriculture, what it's done, you know, to this planet, and all the toxins and poisons that are in our soils and water now because of agriculture. And so I said, I'm not going to have any agriculture in this film, you know. And then I went along that way, and then after a few weeks I thought, well, I'm going to have agriculture because people really are concerned. What's in it for us? You know, what's in it for me? But the film is in 3 chapters. The first third is about soil itself, soil in its nature, you know, that soil has a parent, it has a birth, it has a life cycle, it has different characteristics. There's different kinds of soil that grow up in certain kinds of different environments, and they're, you know, certain soils like mollisols and alpha soils are really good to grow things in. Other soils, you know, are different, like wet soils, like or desert soils. So that was fascinating, really fascinating film project, to try to figure out how to make something that's dark and seemingly inert that most people don't even see, and use a film, which is about light and movement, to bring that into people's hearts and minds. and make people soil conscious so they treat soil better and have a good relationship with soil. Healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy people, healthy planet, and also healthy communities. Because I think when people are in a community together where they're eating the same kind of food and getting their food from soil, and when they have a healthy relationship with soil, I think it's a healthier community.